I just want to start by saying it's really, truly an honor for me to be here speaking at MIT and the McGovern Institute. So today I'm going to talk about a subject that's been in the media a lot lately. You can't turn on the news and hear a report about autism and not hear them talk about autism prevalence. And how it's increased over the years. What we've seen in the recent literature is that autism affects 1 in 110 children in the United States today. These are numbers published by the CDC. That's about 1% of the children in this country. This also represents a 57% increase in just 4 years of data collection. You may remember it was 1 in 150 before it became 1 in 110, and that is quite an increase in a short amount of time. But if you look at the data over 20 years of research publications, you actually see that autism prevalence has increased about 600% over 20 years. Again, these are the numbers published in the data. So about 20 years ago, it affected approximately 1 in 2,500 children. And again, today it's almost 1% of the population. But the question that we keep hearing is this a true rise in autism prevalence? Is it a true increase? Is it real? Over time, the change in diagnostic criteria for autism may have accounted for some of this increase. More specifically, it was the change in diagnosis from mental retardation to autism. So those two circles, I mean, this is taken a little bit out of context, but this picture appears in the report, and what it shows is that that overlap is the new autism cases actually resulting from that shift in diagnosis from mental retardation. And to look at it a little bit differently, what you can see here is that dark slope at the bottom is the expected change in autism prevalence over time due to that shift from mental retardation diagnosis to autism diagnosis. But what we saw here was that extremely large increase, so that gray area is the unexpected rise. And what the researchers from this investigation said was that about 26% of the increase in autism prevalence over that time period in California could be attributed to changing, broadening diagnostic criteria. Also coming from that research lab, what we saw was this idea, we've heard of this idea of maybe the rise in autism prevalence could be due to an increase in awareness of autism. And so what this paper demonstrated was that actually the proximity of a child living to a previously diagnosed child with autism actually increased that child's odds of being diagnosed themselves. So the theory here is that there's some kind of social mechanism taking place where there's this information diffusion or sharing of information within the community that's actually increasing a child's odds of being diagnosed with autism. And the investigators in this study estimated that 16% of that rise in autism prevalence could be attributed to this increased awareness or information diffusion within the community. Recently in the literature, we've heard about parental age. In general, parental age is a risk factor, and it can account for 11% of the increase. And parental age is a social component, right? Parents are choosing to have children later in life, so it's a social factor that's contributing to the increase. So just to review what I went over and what the research literature is showing us today is that, again, 26% of the increase in prevalence can be attributed to changes in diagnostic practices, that broadening criteria. 16% is due to greater awareness, and 11% is due to increase in parental age. Well, if you add that up, there's still about 50% of that increase in autism prevalence that is due to unknown factors. And so the question is, of course, well, what then is causing the increase in autism prevalence? Well, I wish it was a simple answer, but it's not. What we do know is that genetic susceptibility is likely involved in most cases, but then environmental factors also contribute to one's genetic susceptibility. And so what we know is that it's a complex interaction between genes and environment that are likely causing the rise in autism prevalence, but we need to identify those factors and understand exactly how they're contributing to the increase. Right now, the research suggests that about 1% of the global population has autism. However, there have been no studies conducted outside of these high-income developed countries that you can see in blue. We have no idea what the autism prevalence is in the developing world or even middle-income countries. So what does it all mean? Well, the autism crisis is real and growing. It's clear that regardless of whether or not autism prevalence has increased over time, 1% of the population is huge. There are more children today diagnosed with autism than ever before. And half of that increase that we saw over time is still unexplained. It's not caused by just better diagnosis, greater awareness, and social factors alone. There are genetic and environmental factors at play, and we need to understand those environmental factors.